But surely, Christina Marrocco has written a good number of things, and Addio Love Monster won a humanities prize last year, and we're very pleased to have a prize-winning author among us today. Tina has also written a wonderful piece that we're going to include in the Italian Women in Chicago, Volume 2. And for those of you who are fans of the Casa Italia publications, we hope by fall to have published the Italian Women in Chicago, Volume 2. Siamo arrivati is the subtitle. So, look forward to that. Christina teaches at Elgin Community College, and she has been an active member of the Italian American Studies Association, and she will be participating in our iWeek 2, as I mentioned earlier. So, without further ado, and hopefully everyone will come forward to present an audience to Christina Marrocco. Christina?
Too far and people can't hear me, do me a favor and flop like a fish in the back, and then I'll know that means to get closer again. Because sometimes when I start reading, I wander away a little bit. Addio Love Monster was published in 2022. It won Best New Independent Press Fiction for Chicago Writers Association, which was, a great surprise. It's on Amazon and it's on Audible as well, so for people who like to be told a story and just listen, it's there. And this is a novel set between 1946 and 1966 in a fictional area nestled right up against Melrose Park. So it's really heavily influenced by family memories of Melrose Park at that turn of the century, and me trying to capture the people I just missed knowing. I was born just a little bit too late. I'm not going to actually read from this book today because I've read from it here before, and I don't want to be doing the same thing, so what I'm going to read instead is my piece for the upcoming anthology. And I think that'll give you a little taste of the anthology, but it will also speak to this book because part of the piece, the essay I'm going to read, has to do with this. So, and there will be a review of this book in Fronway for the June issue, and that'll be done by Fred Garvey. So, yeah, that'll be great. Okay. This could be a little bit sad, so I'm just giving you the little bit sad warning. But I have a great sense of humor, so that will be present as well. In fact, I like to think I have a great sense of humor, because that's what gets you through the sad, right? It has become my habit to stand, then sit, then finally lay my entire body down at the grave of my daughter, even when there's no snow, or when there is snow or mud. The most recent visit was just 2 days ago, the day I purchased the fall gnome at the Marquette Market on Douglas Avenue in Elgin, to further decorate and make homey the grave. That's a tall order, but this gnome is swapped in resin plastic, fall leaves, of burnt umber, and wears his gnome hat pulled down over his eyes. He's most likely made in China. I placed him between a stitch figurine that's been there since this all started, and another gnome, a summer gnome, who's been holding space since June. As we approach Giorno di Morte, The decorations in the cemetery increase every year. Elgin has a great many Mexican-American residents, and the Day of the Dead will be in full force here. My daughter was a childhood cancer patient who lived to be 34 years old, lived to fight and struggle and love so many things. This fervor of life held until a third and final cancer took her down on Christmas Day 2021. About gnomes, not very Italian-American of us, but then neither is Disney World or all its attendant movies and paraphernalia, nor is the Harry Potter mega industry my adult child embraced as if it were her own story, nor the cartoonish mischiefs of Jack Skellington and his Nightmare Before Christmas crowd, another favorite of hers. As I write, here he is in all his dark glory, the bent figure of Jack Skellington, standing out in relief on a black and gray comforter I took from the closet in her condo after the funeral. Her fiancé Tyler handed it to me like a folded veteran's flag. In my linen closet is another blanket, the folded lush one Tiff had brought to Thanksgiving with the spirit of Christmas already upon her. She was determined to live fully through Christmas and into the new year, probably until her birthday in February. This blanket is covered with images of Santa Claus gnomes, so she's the one who started it with the gnomes. I'm just following suit. I cannot look away from what gave her joy. Tiff's love of such, the consumer mythologies of America, began when she was 3 and hospitalized for the better part of a year at what was then Children's Memorial Hospital and is now Lurie's Children's Hospital in Chicago. It was a lymphoma that time, with a low chance of survival and a protocol invented by St. Jude's. The chemo nearly killed her several times, but it didn't. And she and her roommate, Juliana, who would later die bleeding out in the hospital playroom, spent the better part of a year watching The Little Mermaid together in their separate beds and dreaming of Make-A-Wish trips to Disney World. They were best friends. So there I lay the other day on that cemetery grass, one hand picking away the dead parts of the salvia my brother planted last year around her headstone. I was alone, but not alone, because I'm utterly aware that the body of my only daughter is directly below me. In what state, I try not to imagine, but I have a writer's mind, so it imagines without my permission. They pump the dead with so much preservative these days, she might well look like Sleeping Beauty, but in my mind, she's a skeleton, more than a little like Jack Skellington, whose film I've never actually seen. And yet, in my mind, she's there, bending at the waist like Jack, and wishing she had been able to continue everything she'd planned, the job, the upcoming marriage to Tyler. I talk to her, as one does, until I go quiet. And while I pluck that salvia, throwing the discards into the grass, I think of the Harry Potter books my daughter loved, even as an adult, how they're boxed, a collector's set under my bed. My stated intent when I removed them from her condo was to read them. I mean, Mom, hasn't everyone read them? To know her better. For you can certainly know a person better when you read what they love themselves. And it was my intent this summer, but I just could not yet. There are lots of things I haven't, not yet. For instance, deciding whether to throw out the aforementioned gnome blanket, because every time I open up the linen closet, it grabs me by the throat and breaks my puny heart. She experienced her greatest pains under that fluffy Target sale item, and then there's her wig and her old nail polish, her burgundy wallet, like a time capsule. I wish I could go with her to Harry Potter Land, possibly escape reality, but I'm not sure I belong there. Instead, I keep visiting the past. I keep visiting the ancestors. Just last night, I read from my debut book on Michigan Avenue, a pretty big deal to read stories about the diaspora to a crowd not of the diaspora. You feel like, look here, we matter, and not just to ourselves. We're part of the fabric. I never stepped foot in a penthouse before, so I wasn't on home turf, not like Casa Italia, or the Ethnic Museum in Rockford, or online with pals from New York. This was reading to strangers. But it was still good, and I think perhaps this book is saving my life. because of the people it's about. It's made up of linked, short, fictional stories, much inspired by real people. Real people I knew tangentially or minimally because they were so much older than I was then. Now I'm old. Real people who made the pilgrimage back to the old neighborhood to see everyone every weekend or so. There's the great-grandmother known in whispers as the Iron Fist. Grandparents, great aunts, my mother and her sister's children, assorted neighbors, and completely made up people based on a wisp of imagination. But there's a lot that's real in all of it. The fortitude, the immigration, the gravity, and lots of the details. I was the kind of kid who listened, not around corners or with a cup against the wall, but who was quiet and unobtrusive so that sometimes people just forgot I was there. I heard a lot I wasn't meant to hear. I also heard a lot I was meant to hear because my mother made a point to relay family and neighborhood stories in the sort of repeated way that makes them indelible in your mind, like laying down an LP. My father has never done that, so my mother lays down the stories for his side of the family as well, and I've got a collection. My daughter fought for her life, the two of us riding the train from Elgin to Northwestern, visiting the farmer's market at a Friday appointment when her doctor informed her that she was incurable, terminal, and another word I've probably willed myself to forget. She screamed at him, "It's not fair." And she really screamed on him when he did it. Half of me is still sitting in that hard plastic chair while she perches on the edge of the examining table and screams in his face as she accuses him of giving up on her. Months later, she succumbed. The entire final pack was a lightning bright slog of just under a year. And all the while, I had been there, but also like an automaton. I wrapped up in a book of the ancestors. I suppose I was medicating myself with the collection, the final revisions, meeting with a book developer, chatting with a publisher online, finding a single thing to celebrate. I typed on my laptop in the infusion center while she slapped holding a Starbucks iced espresso something. I visited my ancestors. I'd begun the project 6 years earlier when everybody was relatively healthy. Not knowing why I'd begun, I was simply compelled. The up at night sort of compelled. Maybe, I thought, I was doing it for my mother. My mother who continues even now to trot out the characters and the stories of which we are made. But I don't think so anymore. I don't think it was so much for my mom. And I don't think so because here's what I find as I read my own book aloud to strangers. Here's the great-grandmother whose real name was Rosaria, who came to Melrose Park from New York, from Colasano, Sicily prior to that, having stopped for 3 years with her husband to work in the family pasta factory in Rochester. Rosaria, who after the untimely death of her husband became a professional mourner. Rosaria, who after the subsequent death of her eldest daughter became a different person than she'd ever been before. Some, or much, depending on how you look at it, of her story as I wrote it is fictionalized. Her loss comprises the first story, though, and her death is the last. And all the stories in between are to do with members of the family and their joys and tribulations. The book is fiction, but fiction can sometimes push a person closer to truth than nonfiction can, in the freedom to imagine and listen for the ghosts. I have a few pictures of great-grandma Rosario. In my favorite, she stands, knife in hand. It's like a machete. It's a real knife. She stands, knife in hand, cutting chard and finocchio in the vacant lot garden. The greens hang over her shoulder, and her posture is much like that of a donkey, due to an old hip injury she sustained years before, crawling up a wall to a window in order to spy on her son-in-law, who was gambling away the money of her daughter's household. And she fell. Rosaria in this photo would have been respected as a skilled woman, the neighborhood's midwife and strega. Yes, there she is, and as I wrote her story, she showed herself to me, but not in any soft, sticky, Medigan way. She never shouted or made brutta figura, but also she was not fooling around. Did this Rosaria take to her bed for a month when her husband died and she was left with a crowd of children yet to raise? Certainly she did. Did she howl at the casket of her eldest child, a grown-up girl she just never could get along with? Yes, she did. Did she fight off her own death, though, into her 90s? Yes, all of this. And when her daughter, who was called Jenny, had died, thanks to the family grapevine with my own mother as head grape, I know every detail of how the men from the funeral home came, set up extra chairs and beds, how they brought the extra pots and pans, how they made it possible to house the many neighbors and out-of-town family who came to help my great-grandmother grieve. How women stood in her kitchen and cooked for everyone. How women held cool rags to her head. But who will help us these days? Who will help me? Who will help my sons who miss their sister terribly? And who will help you when the time comes that you suffer critical grief? Because we all do, you know. It is a problem, and not a small one, that we have assimilated to the point of having diminished our relationship with death. While the current U.S. culture in general loves to be scared of ghouls and ghosts at the box office and the neighborhood fright fest, it abhors memento mori. Memento mori, which I would argue is a natural and wise frame of mind, one that will help you survive when those you love don't, and will, in another vein, just help you to gauge what matters and what doesn't. This Americanness proclaims in myriad self-help books and podcasts that grief is a process. This Americanness wakes its dead when it even deigns to do so in rented rooms that often feel like banquet halls ready for prom. It hires out all the tasks to stranieri. Quick, expensive, removed, sanitized. Of course, we are just doing our best with what we have taken on and taken in. But in return, we are left with gaping holes because perhaps we are made in a different shape altogether. Made for these holes to be plugged with the painful grit of performing really difficult death rituals. Rituals like bathing the body. Rituals like a nearly unending 3-night wake that pretty effectively drives everyone out to the other side of denial. Rituals like the crowd formation that gathered and acknowledged the permanence of the change, the gravity of the loss. If you had to be held back from throwing yourself onto the casket like James Brown dragged from his stage, so be it. It was cathartic and real. You never asked for this. My character great-grandmother and my real great-grandmother knew this. What I learned from my ancestors while they allowed me to fictionalize them is no trick, no easy fix. It may be epigenetic or it may be nothing at all. And it wasn't just my Sicilian women who taught me, though their teachings were the most clear. But to a woman, each of my 4 great-grandmothers danced fully with grief. Rosaria, you know her strife already. Leonarda, she lost a baby as well, but maybe more babies, it has been said. Some stories come to us not completely formed, like fetuses themselves. Of Leonardo, we do know that she lost her husband and then she lost her neighborhood when it was torn down by Mayor Daley, despite the valiant efforts of Francis Scully. We know that she tried to care for her grown schizophrenic son in the first half of the 20th century when there was no real understanding of such a thing as schizophrenia in any practical sense. On my Irish and German sides, I have those too. Irish Johanna's husband was clouded on the head after witnessing a crime over on Taylor Street, and he died in his bed 3 days later, leaving her with 5 children to feed and no way to feed them. German Bertha was different in that she hadn't much time to grieve because she died of the Great Flu epidemic in 1918, leaving all her children behind. Her new twins just infants. Bertha was 34. What a downer, you may be thinking. And I think so too, but here's the thing. I have that dramatic, melancholic streak. It's there for a reason. It's like a callus raised over generations, and likely you have it too. When I think of Rosaria grieving in her bed for a month, her remaining children running wild, I want to crawl in there with When I see the photo, yes, of Bertha's mother dressed in black with an equally black umbrella, keeping the sleet off her head as she stands at the grave of her daughter, I want to kiss the image. I want to raise my fist to death by standing right next to it like that. Here, take the photo, she seems to say. See what death has done to my beautiful child? And in my photo box, full of very old photos given to me by my grapevine mother, there's yet another grief photo, this one of Leonardo Canone, my paternal great-grandmother. She's on her hands and knees at her husband's grave. She's got a trowel in her hand and an apron tied over her to keep her spotted dress clean. She's short and wide, a middle-aged woman with the face of a child. She must have been gardening at the grave. She's grinning in spite of it all, because the day is made of fine weather, and because this is about all you can do. All my grandmothers and great-grandmothers and those back 1,000 years, they live in this box. Grief no stranger to any of them. Rosaria, though, above all, is my muse. She was a prefice, a professional mourner. Our modern sensibilities might say to us, my God, why did she want to get stuck in that groove? Why would she have linked herself in such a way to death? How morose. And I would answer for her as best I can. It's because there's no escaping it anyway. So it's best to make death not just on its terms, but on your own as well. It's because there's no better help you can offer than to serve the community by singing and chanting the dead on their way. And it's because it paid relatively well and she had mouths to feed. That in no way diminishes the rest. But really, it was her wrestling with adversity and death. It was her acknowledgement of the real. It can be tempting to dismiss the old Sicilian immigrant women of the past century as superstitious, but in some ways, I would argue they were realists to the core. When I get up from the ground at Bluff City Cemetery, I wrench myself away from the grave, from Tiff's black granite headstone with the Deathly Hallows insignia and the quote from her own notebook on the back, from assorted gnomes and perennials keeping to the height rules of the place. I go to my car, parked alongside the lane of graves only steps away. I roll up all the windows so that no one can hear me. I put my hands to my ears and I scream. This is not at all as though Prefice would have done. Not like this, nor the Keeners. I scream like an animal until my screaming becomes hoarse, which doesn't take very long at that decibel level. I open my eyes and look around to make sure no one has heard and come running, and no one has, so I feel free to scream some more. But then a chanting comes upon me, and I would swear that I am accompanied by Rosaria, Pernice, and Zina. It is as if I have two voices chanting in an unknown language, and it fills the interior of my little white Kia soul. I cannot say, but there's a good chance Rosaria is holding her black Madonna statue, that her eyes are closed as she chants, that she grips my right hand, but not gently. Are there other great-grandmothers in the back seat? I think so, but they are quieter. Rosaria, the iron fist, she's right beside me, and her breath smells of coffee, anisette, and snuff, and I'm relieved to meet her.
That was brilliant. Any questions, comments? Complimenti.
Grazie.
Let's see who the next one is. Our next guest is, I don't know how to describe him. Let's just call him up here. Dominic, it's you. I've been in this business of documenting, sharing Italian-American history, Chicago Italian-American history, for the past almost 50 years. And I have come to the conclusion that the best way to save our stories is just to write the history of our families and to publish it. So I did this book, and it was published last June. And if I could do it, you could do it. You could do it. It ain't that hard. We have CJ, the editor, who will take your text and squeeze it into the to book form for you. He'll even correct your spellings, although I wouldn't trust him too much on the Italian stuff. On the other hand, we have now Amazon publishing. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to pay anything until it's published. There are never any remainders, as in the years past when we ordered 5,000 copies of Proceedings of the American Italian Historical Association and sell maybe 200 of them, and then have all those books left over. Now it's print on demand. This is the first page of the book, and you can scroll a little bit. Anyhow, here's the deal. Using Family Search, which is free online, you can type anybody's name in there, especially if they're dead. And you get like 20 or 30 references to documents that are relevant to their life. Their birth, their marriage, registration for the draft, Army stuff, and you go to also the newspaper. You put in a person's name in the Chicago Tribune Index, and out pop half a dozen articles that have that name in them. And you can access them immediately, take pictures of them, reproduce them for your book. You get a lot of material. Every family has pictures, family pictures. These days, everybody in the audience is carrying around maybe 10,000 pictures in their iPhones. So you got a lot of pictures of people, and as time goes on, these will be older and older pictures and relate to the whole group. You have family documents. Most people keep papers, whether it's a mortgage or maybe people keep even paycheck stubs and that sort of thing. All of those are grist for the mill. You don't have to be simply interested in genealogy and have those family tree after family tree after family tree. Use those family trees because if you, with a little bit of work, you can create these family trees in Family Search, and then you can take pictures of them and publish them in your book to illustrate them. And where are we going with this? This is something from, the Italian side. Antenati in Italian means ancestors. And there is a website called Antenati, which translates into English if you press a button or do something. And it can take you to records of municipalities throughout Italy. It's a little bit hit and miss, depending on what community you happen to be studying. But for my father's hometown, Casoli, it worked very well. For my mother's hometown, it did not work at all. Then, in addition to that, our family histories. With the advancement in AI, you can do an interview with a family member, an older family member. Perhaps it takes an hour or two, and you can have that, you can upload it to YouTube, and YouTube will transcribe it almost perfectly for you, and you've got text to put into your book. It's amazing, and the same thing is true of translation. Translation, AI has made Google translations pretty literary and improved very much over the last few years. And so you can publish. I'll let Anthony tell you about his experience in the next presentation, but he was able to get widespread translations of it. Okay, let me let's sort of scroll through the book, and I'll point some things out. So the Castle family members, my father, the town, this is a building that my father was born in. We have my mother's birthplace too. Pictures go back to the our first visit, 1972. Keep going. This is Amazano, my mother's hometown, and that's our visit in 2017 with my two grandchildren, my daughter, and her family, and the mayor of the town. And so we cover that. It goes back to a church that was built in 1170. Okay. Keep going. Oh, these are pictures of some of the relatives in Amazano that people always talked about when I was a kid, but I never met them until 1972. They're celebrating some kind of a wedding. These are just pictures, screenshots of parts of the family history, the family tree that are given to you by Family Search. And so we go on a little bit more. Scroll. And these are pictures from the documents, the immigration documents at Ellis Island. And you can yellow out the part that you're interested in, and people can take a good look at it. And you can present documents, or parts of documents, along with the text. So it's more like a scrapbook. Go on, scroll. Some more things. Oh, that's my grandfather's up there is my grandfather's certificate. You scroll down. Okay, that's his citizenship. It was just a sheet of paper that was issued by a local judge, and that's when citizenship was pretty darn easy because the political leaders wanted to have more voters. So you'll probably hear more about that in 2024. This is Amazano. This is my mother's birth certificate, I think, yeah, that's my mother's birth certificate. And so you have all this information. You need just a little bit of Italian language capability to figure out what those dotted lines mean. And then this is my other daughter's family, and we're in front of the house that my mother was born in 1909. I don't think it had that kind of metal railing and all that sort of thing, but we went back to we recorded where it is that she was born. Okay, this is a passport, down. That's a passport that came into my hands and had a lot of interesting information about it. On the inside about an unofficially adopted daughter. Oh, forward, down. Okay, this is more of that information, internal. And this is a receipt that was given for taxes in Amazano when my grandfather came to the U.S. He still had to pay the taxes on that land, and he was supposed to have gotten some profits from that land. I see the receipts for the taxes, but I never saw any evidence of the profits. And there's my dad and his story, and he was an illegal entry in 1925 at New Orleans, and I found that he tried it twice within 2 weeks. He just got onto a ship and came into New Orleans, and they sent him back the first time. 2 weeks later he came, and nobody, I can't say nobody bothered him, but they didn't send him back. And he had to battle that problem during the middle of the World War II, when he was classified as an enemy alien because of his illegal status, and had to fight an order of deportation for most of the late 1940s. Keep going. So we do have a lot of text and a few pictures here and there. This is the story of my father's story, and I'm not sure what this is. I can't read it. It might be his birth certificate, but go forward. And here's the look of Castle, my father's hometown, current day. And then this is the family search listing of all of the children in the family, and there were plenty. I think there are 10 or 11 there. And I discovered in this, there was a letter. Was there a letter before this? Scroll up. There. That's a letter from a cousin in Australia who tried to explain who was who in the family. And I just printed that because it was so well done. And it did refer to an infant mortality that nobody in Italy knew about, but that this guy in Australia somehow had learned about. So life is strange. Okay, so let's see a few more things I can. This is my father's army record, and Lucio obtained it for me. He's got connections with the Italian army there, so we got my father's army record, and it shows a little bit about where he was stationed, and he was supposed to be a machine gunner. And he never showed that. My father didn't really like war. He was an opponent of the Vietnam War because of his own experiences in 1917, 1920. Anyhow, and he was given the Bronze Cross there for his service in World War I. Onward, I can't tell what this is because of the lights. These are a lot of census records. Look at the census records. Almost every census has a different question that it asks. Sometimes, do you own the home? How much is it worth? How much do you make? How many hours did you work? Or did you live in the same house you lived in before? And some other things. You can tell a lot about people that way. One thing you can tell, and often you find in the earlier years, is that we're often boarders listed as members of the household. And this was a way of the woman in the family, the wife in the family, of earning some money by feeding and doing washing and doing hosting the boarders. Anyhow, there's a lot that we've gotten out of it. Every family is a little bit different, is stronger on this kind of resource or that kind of resource, photos, documents, memorabilia, and you have pictures of those things or the actual memorabilia objects, take pictures of those and include them in what you're doing. So the simple way to maintain our ethnicity is to save our stories. Save our stories in a book. You can do it on Amazon. You just have, these days, you can always find somebody like TJ who will take your raw text and put it into a format, a PDF format. I'm not sure I remember what PDF means, but that's what they want you to send it to. Send it to Amazon in that format. They check it over. If your margins are right, it's a book. And not that everyone's going to write a bestseller. And one last thing, we went to Italy last June, and I brought 40 copies of this book with me to share with my relatives in Abruzzo. And we, instead of going to visit them, we got an Airbnb, invited them all, there were 30, 40 people there, to join us for a party, and we gave them copies of the book. And one of the aspects of the book is that there are a lot of blank pages in which I invite the reader, I'm assuming though most of the readers are going to be relatives, to give me their accounting of the item that we're talking about at that turn, from their point of view, from their segment of the family, and how that thing influenced them or maybe didn't influence them. And then Amazon allows you to revise. I've already gotten a lot of material about my father's legal position that I need to revise this book on. And I've invited my relatives in Italy and here in the United States to also contribute updates as well. So that's it. I want to encourage everyone to do it. It ain't that hard, and it's worth the fuss. And it could be a fairly cheap Christmas present. After you get the author's price is usually pretty good. You can use that as a Christmas present to various folks. And then it's in print. It's there. It's there forever. A book has that kind of staying power that simply telling people the story of your family audibly is not. It's gone. It's memories that fade. Well, anyhow, I am so pleased to, yes.
I wanted to ask you, what do your children and grandchildren think about it?
They're delighted. I included them in the story, and I included them in the trips to Italy and in various other situations as well. So their pictures are in it. They know where they belong. And one of my grandchildren is on the newspaper at Lyons Township High School, and he wrote a feature article on La Befana as a result of the memories that we came in the books, in this book. And so I heartily recommend it. Every family, or you take 10% of the families of Italian American background, were to do this sort of thing, we would really have a link. You really have an answer to your grandchildren. Well, how am I connected to things Italian? Am I really Italian? And of course, we know that Italians are marrying out at a fast rate, and that the Italian last name will not always tell you who is an Italian American. questions, comments? Quickly, I'm really delighted to introduce the next guy. The next guy is Anthony Venturella. Anthony embarked a while back on gaining Italian citizenship. And he discovered that the documents that he had to collect were about the same documents I was collecting to do my family history. And so, God bless him, he went ahead and he did it. And here's my measly 100-page book, and he's got, show him yours.
So one's passing around right now, but this is 250 pages. So.
And it's got Italian language and all sorts of photos, very good use of both the family search and Antonati. And don't anyone leave, because we got more, a little bit more programming going, then we want to take a group picture, et cetera, et cetera. So stick around. Anthony.
Thank you. My name is Anthony Venturella, and as Dominic said, I'll be presenting my book, which is From Sicily to American Back, and it's in Italian and an English version. I translated what I could for the Italian version, and as he mentioned, you know, I did use a little bit of Google Translate for what I could not get to translate into Italian, but my family and I have a trip planned to Italy, and I plan to give this to some people over in Italy as well, so I wanted to make sure that they could read it. So it's also available out there. I did start with very little information, almost nothing, when I started this project, and like many of us, you know, so what I decided to do is I wanted to take the documents and actually do something with them instead of letting them collect in a folder, and so I wanted to copy them and make sure that I had them there for future generations. And I've read many family histories since I started this project. Some family histories are focused more on the pictures and the stories, and some other ones I've read are you know, almost 1,000 pages long of this person had this child, they lived at this place, and you know, just really a historical kind of documented book. Everybody's got their own style with that. I didn't want this just to be my family story, so I wanted it to be a tool for the entire Italian American community. There was a lot of history to share, and so it really became a multi-purpose book. Coming from an approach of wanting to find your roots, but possibly not knowing where to start. Or possibly even taking that step of Italian citizenship with the documents that you gather for this book. So many of the themes from this book are common and relatable to what a lot of your families went through as they made their journeys to America. Next slide. So about me, I'm an engineering and technology manager. I have my bachelor's degree from Colorado State University in information technology, and also my MBA from Louisiana State University. I am not a professional genealogist or historian, and before this book I was not an author. So I just kind of collected documents and started putting stuff together and saw how it came out. Originally from Chicago, but I'm currently living in Arkansas. So an intro to this, you know, I was curious about my family history, so I decided to start researching into it, and that led to the discovery of some knowledge and also some of the family secrets that I didn't know existed. And the other thing that I discovered in my search was that I was eligible for Italian citizenship. Started digging a little bit into that and started calling some companies to say, you know, how do I get these documents, what do I have to do for this? And I was quoted about $15,000 to $20,000 to get all my documents put together, collected, and translated for insertion into the Italian consulate for my citizenship purposes. So I said, I'm not going to spend $15,000 to $20,000. Let me see how much it'll take to do it on my own. And on my own, it was about $1,500 total to get everything together and do that. And then, you know, I wanted a place to store documents, and so that's where the workshop came into place that we put on by Dr. Candeloro, and really that helped tie this book together because I needed a template or a guideline to kind of go by and put this in. So thanks to you, Dominic, for the work that you did on yours, for sure. So like I said, I kind of wanted this to be more than just my own family history, and so what I would say when I describe this book is that it's really kind of 3 smaller books put together in one. One of the books that I would say this is a history of the town that my family came from, which is Campo Felice di Rocella, and how they came to be, the stemma, all of the different things that went into the history of that town. The other thing that I would say is it's an Italian citizenship guide. So it's a guide for you to follow if you're looking to get Italian citizenship or even curious about it. There's definitely a lot of research and information in here that you can use for that. And then also it is my family history and all the documents that tied together for that and made that what it is. So every time that I would find a document or a piece of info, it would tie me to more stories about the time period or about kind of what my family lived through, different people, different events, and it just kept opening more doors for me to investigate as I would piece together each thing. I would look at a ship record and it would have an address on it, and so I'd look that address up and come to find out that Louis Armstrong lived in this house, and stuff like that. So the boat that my great-grandmother came over on, I would look that boat up and come to find out that it was converted to a World War I vessel, and it was sunk off the coast of France. There were a couple of attempts of coming over and crossing over, and there was tickets that were bought to make the voyage, and come to find out that maybe they bought the ticket and never came over. And so some of this stuff is still a little bit of a mystery that I'm still going through as I'm researching. So also found out about the wheel situation and how sometimes children were abandoned on wheels, at the sake of putting one off. At the time, maybe people couldn't feed their entire family, so they put this child onto a wheel and almost abandoned the child. And one of my relatives that happened to. So I didn't know about any of this before I started this process, but went ahead and started digging, and that's what I came with. So.
What do you mean by the wheel?
So a child would be abandoned, and what they would do is they would leave a child on a wheel, and this wheel would have one entrance going to the outside of the building, and the other side would be into the church. And so a mother would be anonymous and leaving their child on that. Yeah.
Like Lazy Susan.
Kind of like Lazy Susan.
There's Christopher Plummer, the actor.
Yep.
His name Maloney comes from the term that they use for these abandoned children, melons. They were called melons in northern Italy.
Yep.
Yeah, they leave them at the church, involving them.
Yeah, and so the child would be protected from the elements, and on the other side, the mother that dropped him off would be anonymous. And so, there could be a bell.
And there would be nuns attached sometimes with the child, or maybe a little man, the mother's know.
Right. Yeah.
Some of them are
Yeah. And so, that did lead to a little bit of a stoppage of my search for the parents there, but also it explained a lot. The name they had on the birth certificate was Esposto or Exposed. Esposito. Yeah, there's another one that they did there. So, and these are all just stories that I found just from looking at birth certificates and looking up what that means, and some of these could be stories of their own, entire books of their own, of some of the kind of stuff that I found here. So, also found things about my grandfather in World War II and his he was in there with his brother. His brother ended up dying, but the whole time his father was going for Italian citizenship and was rejected due to being an alien enemy. So it's all kind of there in the book, and there's also some of the other things there, which was like the Targa Florio. It's a famous race in Sicily, and how it ties to the city. Some of the World War II landing events. There was an Operation Husky was one of the operations there of World War II, and they landed right there in the town that my family's from. So different Ellis Island experiences. I even found out about yellow fever in New Orleans, which I didn't know there was an epidemic there, and it actually ended up taking my great-grandfather in New Orleans, and there was a lot of times when they thought that immigrants were actually bringing that over until they found out that it was mosquitoes. So it's a lot of that kind of tied into the book. So as well as some oral histories. One of those I found out about a Christmas Eve Las Vegas wedding and then a divorce, so I put that in the book. And also about a borrowed or stolen sauce recipe, so that's also in there. Yep. Yeah, so as I would search and things like that, I would learn new tactics and skills. My method for when I didn't know where to start was I just started with my mother, and I would go back to her parents and back, just kept going back generations. It would have been nice for me to be able to start with my second great-grandfather's wedding and kind of how that goes, but I couldn't get there until I knew, who he was, what town he lived in, and all that kind of stuff. So once I found that, I was able to go kind of sideways. I was talking to somebody earlier, we talked about using multiple sources. You can't just do just the one source. That can quickly lead you down a path of looking down the wrong line of family members and things. So cross-referencing and things like that is definitely part of that. Looking at indexed and non-indexed searches, and what that is just, if it's indexed, you can put the name in, like Dr. Candeloro was saying earlier, you can put the name in and 45 results may come up. Well, sometimes you can put it in and sometimes you can't find anything. Well, then you have to go into the non-indexed searches and start really reading through a lot of stuff there. So asterisk sign is a big thing that I didn't know about, but I learned about, and that's used as a wild card when you're doing your searches. Also picked up on a lot of Italian language skills when I was doing this. So you read a lot of documents and you start kind of piecing that together and translating, and now you're starting to read Italian documents, and so that really helped with my Italian language skills. And then just learning about the cultural significance of the documents you're looking at. There was documents that you wouldn't think existed that actually exist, and some of those are like different marriage documents or promises to marry and different things that you don't even know about here in America because it doesn't exist, but over there it does, and you can find those and kind of see why they exist. So. In this next section, I'm going to cover some of the chapters in my book. Just go to the next one there. Yeah, so the first part of my book really goes into Campo Felice and the history of how it came to be. Like I mentioned earlier, the stemma of the city and different parts of that. About the piazza and the church there, as well as the castello in the city, which is in the stemma. As you can see, the book's going around on the front cover, you can see that. As well as the significance of the castle and battles and the different culture from that. I also include a lot of historical pictures from the city for that. Going into the Targa Florio, I do mention the significance of that race and the amount of people that it brought to the area, and a lot of the facts about it, as well as a lot of the pics and programs and posters. There was also a lot of danger involved with that race. So, fast cars speeding through narrow streets and things like that can get pretty dangerous, and there's some pictures of some of the kind of carnage with that. So, also the current status of the race. There's a historical version of that race, but yeah, as you started getting into like the 70s and things like that, you started getting some Porsches and some Ferraris and things that were getting pretty high speed and a little bit bigger, and there's a couple pictures in that book of a Porsche that's pretty torn up that crashed into a tree. So yeah, they started putting slow down on that race, and now it's more of a historical rally kind of thing. Then I go into the Venturellas at Campo Felice, and so it's really about my family history inside the city. I've got my own family tree in there, and then some of the environment that was going on in that area, which led them to start wanting to come towards America. I've got their role in the migration, which is similar to the stories that many of your families had gone through to come over to America. So them coming from a small town over to big cities of like New Orleans and New York, and then into the other cities of America like Pittsburgh, Chicago, different places like that. So yeah, so then I go into the family searching process. And I started looking at, my tactics for searching, and how I was kind of, like I mentioned earlier, going through, and I'd search a name and I'd tie it to other documents and cross-reference those documents. And then I started looking at my failure points as well that I mentioned in this book, so that you guys don't fall into the same traps with that. And not using asterisk or wild cards, not looking at sideways documents. If I can't read somebody's document, well, there's probably other kids in the line that I can read those documents and get some more information. Didn't do that at first, and it really slowed my research down. And then I do go into Antonati and family search. I look at Italian documents and explain some of those as well. The indexes, which are found in the back of the books. So if you're looking for you first type the name in, you don't see the name you're looking for, but you know the year, you can go to the book and manually look at the back, and sometimes they have numbered where in the book that document is that you can look for. So step-by-step searches, I do sample searches for that. How to tie the documents together, and then a lot of the free resources that I used, such as family search centers and different things that I used to tie that together. So, yeah, so then I cover my lineage as a guide, and with documents that you may come across or need in your searches. And this could be for either citizenship purposes or just for your own family search to tie it into the book. I use military documents and NARA documents, which is the National Archives. USCIS, the census documents, some medical documents, ship records, different pictures and stories. I even filed a Freedom of Information Act. Got Social Security information for my great-grandparents and grandparents to tie into it. So lots and lots of information and things that are available for you out there if you wanted to find something.
So the question, how did you get medical records?
So my great-grandfather, what I ended up finding out was on his death certificate, it showed that he was in a state hospital. And so what I did was I went and looked at the state hospital records. I was able to request for those, and they went ahead and sent me the documents behind that, and I put them in the book there. So.
Were you able to get cause of death?
Yeah, yep. And so.
Those certificates I have found don't seem to have.
Yeah. It did have his cause of death inside the document, and I was able to kind of tie that together with the medical records, and it did show his cause of death, and that's all.